All right, everybody, welcome back to the Outdoor Drive Podcast, episode 228. I say this all the time. I need a new intro, I think.
Maybe I should start the shows.
Do you want to start the show? Do you want me to stop
No,
it and then you
absolutely
re-record?
not. I didn't sign up for that shit.
Why not? Do we just turn it around?
I like how
No?
you do it.
All right, anyways. So, this is your host, East Coast Trev, and I got my good buddy, Mr. Madman Mardick.
Soon to be host.
Host Madman Mardick.
What up?
What's up, buddy? Oh,
You're back. How was ATA?
ATA was fun, dude. A lot of really good products, some really cool things. We're actually dropping those on the YouTube side. Latitude dropped a new bow hanger. I got the
Mm.
mule stabilizer on there, painted arrow. That one is soon to be dropped if it hasn't already dropped already. I got a couple in the bank. I did some interviews with a couple of different people, just kind of some newer products. It was just fun. It was cool to catch up with everyone. I want to thank Amy from Bowhunters United for inviting me out. It was cool. It was great to see her. She's such a great person, and it was kind of funny. We walked in the first day, and she was there. She was super busy the first day, and I had posted on the Instagram, story that we were there, and she messaged me. Well, you didn't come and see me, and I was like, I'll come see you tomorrow. So she had messaged me or whatever, and I went and saw her. But it was just nice to be there. Saw the boys from Working Class Bowhunter, hung out with the Latitude boys, Adam. From Bowhunters Chronicle, Aaron Blicey from the Fall, all the Latitude guys. We saw the Elevate boys, hung out with them. Dude, I'll tell you, probably the best recap of the whole entire show, honestly, was the Badlands Film Festival.
Mm.
It was, it truly was one of the coolest things ever. I was super pumped about it to be able to be there and kind of see what's going on. And of course, we hung out with the Spy High guys because that's like our normality when we go somewhere is hang out with the Spy High boys, Brian and Brad. And so we went
Glad I
to
wasn't there.
yeah, we went to the film festival with those guys and we sat there and watched all the videos. And the short films were super cool. There was an awesome one. It's called Red Wing, and it's about him taking his grandfather's bow, or no, his father's bow, and shooting a deer out of the same exact tree that his dad shot his out of it. So he took the bow for its last hunt. It was super touching. Like all that stuff is super touching. And then so they have a short film series, and then they have a long film series. Bro, some of the long films were so cool. One of them out was Jared and Josh
Josh?
from Elevate. Yeah, their elk hunt, wicked cool. Wicked cool hunt. You guys can see that online. You get on over to Elevate, you can watch that one. There was a moose hunt. This guy got within like 15 yards of this giant moose, and he's right there, and two moose are fighting. Bro, he shoots it once, thwack, and they're still fighting. Thwack, shoots it twice. He ended up shooting it 5 times while they're still fighting, and then the thing ends up going down. So badass. Such a great film. There was a pile of them, but the winner was 11-year-old girl. She shot a 154-inch deer, and so in early season. So it's the buildup of her as a young lady and training herself to get to 25 pounds to 35 pounds, so that she could actually hunt. So she ends up hunting with her dad, and it was early season, and she's 11. And they were just going on a hunt, and they talk about how they never shoot an early season buck and this, that, and the other thing. And then they had seen a small little buck, maybe like a nice 6 pointer or whatever, and it was too far away. And next thing you know, there's this absolute just giant. I saw it coming on the film, and I'm like, wow, that's a stud. So she ends up shooting it, and she 12 rings it, right? And so she turns to the camera, and she turns to the camera, her father, and she's talking to him. She's like, "I just shot up," and she's losing her mind. And her dad goes, "That's my big buck!" Like, oh my god! And she's like, "I'm so sorry, Dad. I'm so," and he's like all excited. Like it was just a great film. And she ended up winning, and she got up on stage, and she just started crying. She's like, I'm so thankful to be able to win it. Like, this girl's going to remember this. Not only that hunt for the rest of her life, but that she won the film festival at ATA in Badlands. It was incredible. And she was just so thankful that she was able to hunt with her dad. Like, and it was super touching. And they gave away so much stuff. And we got to go to the Mossy Oak dinner. And they gave out all kinds of awards. The original designer of PSE, he got an award and had a long talk. Cuz Strickland, kind of led it, was kind of like the commentator for it and stuff. And it was just a great thing, man. It was just a great show. It was in the world's shittiest city ever. That place is the worst place I've ever been in my entire life. Just dirty, nasty. You're afraid to go everywhere. I'm so glad that it's going to be in Indianapolis for the next 3 years, because that place is just a horrible place. I don't ever want to go back to St. Louis as long as I live. Just a horrible city. I absolutely hated it there. Just it was just a grimy city, man. I just didn't care for it, but it was good to be home, man, and had the chance to go and do that. And yeah, that was about it, dude. I mean, it was cool to see everybody and catch up. That was definitely
Sweet.
the best part. And that was about it. I
That's what show season's all about.
Yeah, and we got a couple more shows coming up. We're gonna do Harrisburg, NWTF. We have the Springfield Sportsman Show. We got our booth for Mohegan Sun. I think we're gonna go to the Mobile Hunters Expo, and I don't know. I don't know what else we're gonna do. I don't know if we're gonna do the whole if we're gonna do hunt stock or not, because I think it's gonna correlate with the Mobile Hunting Expo. There is one in New York, so I don't know. We'll see what happens. We gotta kind of plan it out. Everything's kind of coming together too quickly with everything that we got going on. But I did want to tell you this, and I'll tell you it on the air. I meant to text you actually about it. I went in and tried finding that deer's antlers.
Oh, you already went
I went in there once, yeah.
to the spot?
I didn't find anything.
Hmm.
I
Some deer are still holding.
I put in
Might be
4
holding.
miles in there, but
Hmm.
I don't know. It was cool. It was good to get out though. I thought
Yeah.
for sure I was gonna be able to find some antlers, and I knew the snow was coming, the ice was coming, so I just wanted to run the dog real quick and see and just kind of dust off everything. Definitely, there was a lot of pieces to the puzzle that definitely got put together. That, like, that core area that I had been hunting is the area. Like, that's
Hmm.
the spot within the spot for sure. There's a tons of big scrapes in there that had been opened up recently. Um,
Hmm.
so
You're gonna go
it
back in there. You're not done in there. You're gonna go back, right?
oh dude, I'm not even close to done. I
Yeah.
did one
There's
run in there. I'm not even close to done. Not even.
yeah.
I'm gonna
There's a
tear.
couple spots in there that I have some pins that you need to check out. Boots in the ground. So
Yeah, and I really want to find those antlers and try and put it together. And after listening to this podcast, like, it kind of puts a lot of stuff into correlation. Like, I really want to look at a map and kind of see where that deer is bedding, because it's I think it'll put the pieces of the puzzle back together for us. I think I need to move a little bit forward, but we'll talk about that later. But I think
yeah.
after this podcast, I think a lot of things will come into click for a lot of people. Did you have a killer's corner for this one or no?
Just a bunch of squirrels coming in.
Which is cool.
The
And I want to apologize to everybody. Normally we do the squirrel competition. Things have just been absolutely acidine for us. We've just been so crazy with, doing things and lining up podcasts, and, it's no excuse, but, we just didn't do the squirrel competition, but we'll bring it back full fledged next year. And those guys that are catching it, dude, Mr. Carpenter,
I was getting there. Yeah.
bro,
Yeah.
let's talk
I mean,
about
we
it.
could hold on. Well, before we get to Kaysen, I mean, we can just basically just call it now that Josh Rutkowski's gonna win the unofficial squirrel competition because he's just crushing it as usual.
Mm.
But yeah, Kaysen, another species for him. If I'm reading it correctly, I think those might be his first squirrels. So
So
he's just another notch in the old belt buckle, if you know what I mean.
so he shot him with guns, right?
Yeah.
Now his dad was texting me yesterday or the other day and was saying that he's out there chasing it with his bow now. Now he wants to shoot squirrels with his bow.
I love it.
Super proud of the kid, man. Super cool to see him, do that kind of stuff, and turkey season being right around the corner. It's exciting. Super exciting. But let's clean up the floor, man, and let's get into this podcast because I think Greg's got a lot to tell, and I think that it's going to put a lot of pieces of the puzzle together for some of you guys, scouting or just putting pieces together for that hunting the hunting scenario for you. I think that
For sure.
Greg definitely does it. And don't the other thing too, we have another really good podcast coming next week on postseason scouting too. So take your notes on this one and then tune into next week. And I think that it will even correlate even more to what is going on in the outdoor woods for you guys. So first but not least by any means, huntworthgear.com, guys. They are the leading sponsor here and our title sponsor. Huntworth Gear is the official camo of the Outdoor Drive. Check those guys out, huntworthgear.com. Some sales right now, 25 to 50% off on all apparel online. Super good stuff. Probably some of the best, I think, in my opinion, usability as far as the warmth and all that heat boost is probably the warmest there is. And listen, just take my word on it. If you don't like it, let me know. I'll personally send you a refund because it is the best on the market. Nor'easter Game Calls, nor'eastergamecalls.com. They are the official calls of the Outdoor Drive. There's some really good stuff there. Turkey season is right around the corner. Turkey calls, pot calls, box calls, crow calls, the whole nine. We are literally, I'm going to tell you, there is a secret that is about to come out, and we are within weeks
Oh, weeks. I'm
of
gonna hold you to
of
that.
dropping teasers of what is about to happen. We have some very big news with Nor'easter of what we got going on. I promise you guys, just hold on just a little bit more, and I will promise you guys will have some really cool stuff come turkey season. So just bear with me just a little bit longer, and I have some very good news for you guys. So watch on social media. Also, latitudeoutdoors.com. You guys all saw the video over on YouTube. If you didn't, man, go and check it out. They just released some really cool stuff, some big things coming from those guys. So make sure to follow them, latitudeoutdoors.com, and on all social media platforms. Some really big things coming from Latitudes. And last but not least, Bowhunters United, bowhuntersunited.com. It is a free membership, and you get some really great things from them. So go and check them out, bowhuntersunited.com. Bingo.
Love it.
I know it's kind of long-winded, but well, dude.
Short and sweet.
Yeah,
Never.
I know. But yeah. Some good things coming from us. We have some really cool things. Make sure to go and subscribe on the YouTube page. Like and subscribe. Hit the notification buttons there. We are on TikTok. We are on Instagram. We are on Facebook. We have a Facebook group called The Outdoor Drive. Make sure to follow along. Tell everybody. Give us a 5-star review on any of the platforms that you are listening to. Give us a little shout out there. You can always head on over to outdoordrive.com. We do have merchandise over there for you guys to buy. And I think potentially, I don't know, but I'm working on a Patreon account, which will give you a little. Yeah, I think we're gonna do a Patreon. And well, actually, Steve's gonna be the one that does it because he's gonna add extra content weekly on there. No, just kidding.
I barely get the shit that I'm supposed to get done. You give me more to do?
No, we'll do some cool stuff. I think we'll have some little podcasts or just little things. We'll do some giveaways or something. I'm looking into it. Not sure if I'm going to do it or not, but I think we're going to do something. Just kind of give.
Dude,
back
can I
to
have my
our
own
listeners.
podcast?
You can. You want to have your own podcast? We can have
No,
Steve's
but it would
podcast.
be cool.
We can do Steve's podcast on Patreon. I'm down with that. I think it would be kind of cool. I think we should do something.
By himself?
Just Steve by himself. What are you gonna? Whatever. Who cares? Listen, we got to get on the podcast. We can talk about all this later. Listen, let's get Greg on the phone. Enough is enough.
The Outdoor Drive Podcast.
All right, guys, super pumped to have on Greg from Whitetail Partners. What's going on, Greg?
Not much. Just in the middle of traveling right now. Have a busy weekend ahead of me, working on some properties, and just excited to talk some deer and break up my drive a little bit.
Yeah, so is this like the busy season now that the deer season has kind of come to crashing halt?
Yeah. Right now, it's like because a lot of the people I work with are either people who are just buying a new property or people that may have hunted their piece for a year, a couple of years, and they aren't getting the results that they want from it. So it usually sets in like once people kind of understand that they're not going to be filling their tags or the season didn't go the way they wanted it to and they're ready to make those improvements, take things to the next level. That's usually when I'm fielding the most phone calls is right after everybody's ready to take their deer hunting property to the next level for the upcoming season.
So what? They didn't shoot a 200 incher, so now they're calling you to see if you can help them out in that. Is that how that works?
Yeah, yeah, it's something like that. And unfortunately, I can't guarantee any 200 inchers, but I do my dang hardest to try to help them get to that.
Can you help us do that on public land? Do you think?
I got to figure that out myself first before I start dishing that advice out. I definitely like helping people, but until I find out how to kill that 200 on public, I'm going to keep those secrets to myself.
All right. Well, when you figure it out, can I be number one on the list, please?
Yeah, definitely.
Greg, I got a question already. So,
Yep.
habitat improvement postseason,
hmm
you're limited time, especially when you have multiple clients you have to get to, right? This is something that I've struggled with as far as like when to start, right? Our season ends December 31st. I want to start January 1st, but then sometimes I struggle with, do I let the deer do their things? Do I wait for them to shed out so I'm not pushing deer off my property when I'm in there with the chainsaw? What's your thought on,
Hey,
do you
Steve.
get,
Steve,
yeah.
I know that you're super excited for this, but can we just put this thing in four-wheel drive so you can tell everybody
Oh
who
my
he is,
God.
where he's
Oh man.
from, or what he does? Steve's like off the chain on this, bro. Like, chill out one second. Let the man
One of my
introduce
favorite
himself.
topics here, man. I've been waiting all week for this.
All right. First off, Greg, can you introduce yourself? Tell everybody who you are, where you're from, and a little bit about what you do, my friend.
Yeah, definitely. So, Greg Kazmierski, that's my name. I live down in Southeast Ohio, and I do work as a whitetail habitat consultant, and then I also am a licensed realtor in the state of Ohio. So, when I'm helping people on the consultant side of things, I'm just working on their property with them and basically putting together a habitat plan to help them achieve whatever it is that their whitetail goals are. It's different for every person. So I just take a lot of time on the front end to get to know the landowner and really help them put this property in place so that way they can really achieve their goals. And then on the real estate side of things, I specifically like to focus on like the recreational land, same type of thing. I can plug people into that system and really help them find the right property before designing it and turning it into whatever it is that they envision it to be.
That's awesome. That's super cool. All right, Steve.
Mm-hmm.
Now I know you're chomping at the bit over there, bro. Now just okay. Now it's your turn.
So, all right. So sum it up. Let's say we've got listeners that want to do some habitat work on their own property. They don't have a consultant. They're just going to wing it because they watch
Mm-hmm.
you or whatever. Especially like bedding area, or like say they want to manipulate some bedding area. Would your advice be to just get in there and get it done as soon as possible? Should they wait a certain amount of time? Like maybe wait till everybody sheds out? What would be your recommendation for something like that?
Yeah. So for something like that, what I always tell guys is whenever you feel comfortable that you're not going to do any harm, like the last thing that I would want to see happen is somebody go in and dive in and start doing habitat work on their property and bump out their target buck to the neighbors who's still able to hunt.
Mm,
And then they tag him in the late season. So whenever the season closes, or if you feel like your property is set up where you're not worried about pushing deer outside of it, then it's okay to get in there and do that habitat work. But typically, that's why like guys will bring me out right when the season's finishing up, or if they feel like they're in a situation where it's okay if we push some deer around because nothing's going to happen if they leave the property for a day or two. So as long as you're able to be comfortable that nothing's going to happen to those deer, that's usually when I say go ahead and get in there and do it because we all only have so much time to spend on the habitat work. So take advantage of the days when they exist. But yeah, definitely don't bump those deer out if you're worried about someone else tagging them.
Right. Cool. Yeah, because like you said, it's very limited time.
Yeah.
Especially if you're blue collar, you're working Monday through Friday. Maybe you only get the weekends or Saturdays to do the work on your property. Those days go by fast. It's green up before you know it.
Oh yeah, yep. That's the big thing, and and that's the challenge with me is I work with a lot of people that I'm going to visit their properties on the weekends, and then designing the property the following week. And that really limits the time that I get to spend on my own personal projects because the majority of my time during habitat season is done helping other landowners. So thankfully, I have a really good idea of what needs to be done and when, so I can just dive right into it and get the project done in that day. But it's definitely a time management thing. But when I work with a landowner, I make sure to be very diligent on the process of here's the projects you need to start with, and it would be a really good idea to get these done before the next hunting season because they're going to have the biggest impact in helping you achieve the goals you're looking to achieve on your property this upcoming year.
So when you
Right.
talk to those guys about like manipulating their property and so on and so forth, like what are some of the key things? Is it like food? Is it bedding? Or like does some properties have one thing over another that like if they're living on their neighbors, can you manipulate it to put bedding on your own property to get them to be there? You know what I'm saying? Like,
Yeah, yep. So, and it's like, it's so hard to wrap that all into just one answer because every property is so unique. But basically, what you're doing is you're taking like all of those variables that you just mentioned of what does the neighbor's property have that my property doesn't? What does my property already have? And how can I put all of those things together to work into sync of high quality, high odds access and stand locations? Because that's what it all boils down to. You can have the perfect habitat, but if you can't hunt it, then there really isn't a point because that's what we're doing this for is I'm working with these guys to really improve their hunting experience. So it's taking all those independent variables and just really gift wrapping them and finding those prime locations that are going to intersect all of that key travel. But it's really a mix of everything from bedding to food to travel corridors. I'm a big guy on mock scrapes and water hole setups as well. Just however that individual property really fits. I'm just going to plug it in however I need to.
so you just brought up a key thing that never really gets talked to, and that's it's water hole sets. Like
Mm-hmm.
what like I know mock scrapes, like we all, live and die by scrapes and this, that, and the other thing. But like water hole sets, like what is the deal with that? I definitely want to dive a little bit into that so that people can kind of understand and what you can do with them.
Yeah, so my idea is whenever I'm piecing things together, like I'll have bedding and then I'll have food sources. Then you have the travel that either connects the two or ideally like what I like to do is set up food, dough bedding close by and then some travel behind that to influence the bucks cruising when they're trying to like get some good scent checking on those areas. And what my goal is to develop these corridors in a way where if you add in things like mock scrapes and then water holes, all you're doing is you're stacking these things on top of each other that's giving that buck a reason to use that travel corridor. So if there's a mock scrape and a water hole on the downwind side of doe bedding, those are multiple reasons for the buck to use that corridor, but it's not anything that's going to make him not want to do it because we can't make the buck use that corridor. But if we set it up where we know it's a prevailing northwest wind typically here, so we put it on the south side of a doe bedding area. If that buck either wants to A, check a mock scrape or B, get a drink of water because he's been dogging does all week, well, we have both of those things right at a stand location. But again, both of those things aren't going to like make him not want to visit that travel corridor. So I'm just trying to stack as many things as possible for those bucks to want to use the corridors as I intend them to.
So when you say like a watering hole, like are you literally burying like I'm thinking like a small little pond type thing. How would
Yeah,
you
so it's
make
just going to
that?
be yeah, so best luck that I've had is just you can get like 100-gallon tub right from Tractor Supply is where I go, and you can just get those and you dig it out and then you place that in the ground and bury around it. And there's different methods depending on where exactly the water hole is located on your property of how you're going to fill that. Sometimes guys have a water source nearby that they can use, but I like to use those from Tractor Supply just because they're cost effective method to do so. I've never not had luck with them. So it's just one of those things. If it's not broke, like don't try to go above and beyond. Just give the deer what they need.
I just thought it was kind of cool, something a little bit different that's not really talked about when it comes to that kind of stuff. I mean, you see it sometimes, but it's not like a home run thing where everybody talking about it and doing it like a scrape. Like
Yeah.
there's 100 different ways to do a scrape, right, or a mock scrape, like a hemp rope and this and that and this and that. But like you don't hear much about watering sources.
Yep. Yeah, and it's really unique to the private land setting, but because the other thing on top of it too is to add in the water holes. If you don't have access to heavy equipment, it involves you going out there with a shovel and digging a deep hole and then putting this thing in there. So there's a lot of sweat equity that goes into these projects. It's just ways to keep making the bucks want to use that corridor. But yeah, it's something that is definitely a nice add-on that I've found to these designs, and I've definitely seen guys have some really good success with them.
And shooting them over water and stuff like that, like that's a big
Y-
thing.
Yep, yeah, it is a big thing for the Bucks to come in there, especially like when they're getting into like that late October, early November time frame. They'll come in and either check that mock scrape or take a drink out of that water hole or do both at the same time, whatever it may be. The other thing it does too is it's going to attract other deer to that area, and it just gives the Bucks a reason to come in and check out what's going on in this little site where I have the mock scrape and water hole combo. I'm going to check out what all the other deer are doing here as well. So again, just stacking those odds, and that's really my main goal with these corridors.
So when a customer gets a hold of you, right, and they start, they want you to do some property, maintenance or whatever, or manipulating of the property. Like, do you like e-scout their property before you go there to kind of have a little bit about what's going on there, or?
Oh yeah. So typically, when the first time that I talk to somebody, after they let me know that they're interested in potentially working with me, we usually have a phone conversation that lasts anywhere from a half hour to over an hour, and I'm just really getting to know them. What is it that they're trying to do with their property? And I'll pull up their property on Onyx and get a good idea of how I think the deer are going to use their land naturally and what are the opportunities that I can already see. So I'm like, really, once I know I'm going to work with somebody, I'm actively drawing that design before I even put boots on the ground. So that way, once I get there, I'm either confirming or denying these assumptions that I made on the front end, which makes the work being on site a lot more effective. So it's nothing for me to have 20 to 30 waypoints on a property marked before I ever even look at it. And I go as far as making sure to even like if I can see the property from different roads, like I want to see how it connects with the rest of the neighborhood because that all comes into it too. Are there certain choke points that deer are entering and exiting the property? Are there places where you drive by and all of a sudden you see the neighboring property and there's 6 enclosed blinds on the field edge? And because all of that goes into play on putting these designs together.
Is there certain things that you're looking for when you're e-scouting it though? Like, I mean, like you can't just deny somebody because they don't have the greatest terrain features, right? Like that's just makes it a little bit tougher for you. Like,
Yeah, yeah, I'm definitely not denying anybody for that, and I'm definitely like keeping an eye out because I cut my teeth being a public land hunter. Like that's what I grew up doing. I started traveling out of state doing bow hunts with my friends like 5 or 6 years ago, and I do it so much that I just love the e-scouting aspect of it anyway, and it's just like this opportunity to pick apart a new property, and I like try to challenge myself in a way where I'm like if I were to just be coming in here to bow hunt this property, where are the 5 places I would want to start, or whatever that number is, depending on the size of the property? But typically, like, and I'm not saying that I'm a map reading expert or that you can tell the best places 100% by looking at a map, but I've looked at enough properties on a map now that I can mark a place on Onyx and go to that mark on the property, and more than likely there's going to be a high activity of deer sign in that zone. Just because it's very similar. They do a lot of the same things, especially in unpressured environments. So you can just really pick up on the tendencies when you're looking at maps literally every single day.
So what are those things that you're looking for, I guess, more or less for guys that are e-scouting? Like what are some of the those main things that you are looking for when looking on a map?
So that's definitely going to vary depending on where I am exactly, because even within the state of Ohio, things look a lot different from north central, northwest Ohio to southeast Ohio. Um, it's a lot easier to pick out these features in the hills for me. And when you're looking at it from a hill country perspective, and again, it's important to keep in mind this is in an unpressured scenario, really looking for those key terrain features that I know is going to condense deer movement. And that's going to be any type of break in an otherwise steep elevation. So these are your things like your saddles, which is the flat area between two hilltops, your hillside benches, which is literally like it looks like a street bench, and where you would be sitting down, that's where the deer are going to travel. Drainages is another big one. The tops of those drainages is a flat area. So in hill country, what I'm identifying from a 30,000 foot view is where are the easiest places for these deer to walk? Because in the very steep parts of these hills, if they don't have to walk there, there's no reason for them to do so.
So they want the least passive resistance when they're walking and moving around on a property.
Correct. Yep. And then that's what you use to stack these habitat projects on top of those easy terrain features. And that's how you get those hill country bucks to want to use the property in a very specific way.
And then when you're doing it, so like say that you're gonna make a mock scrape or whatever in some of those terrain features, like you're not gonna put them in a saddle, right? Or like where would you place those along those features?
Yep. So that's going to really come down to where's the best access and potential stand location. And I'll add in those mock scrapes and or a water hole around those stand locations, because the idea with those is for it to be a draw for those bucks to come right to that spot. So I will find the tree, the quote unquote tree where I want to put the stand set up before I'm choosing a mock scrape water hole location, because having the tree, especially in hill country, like it's very important to be in the right tree. And then
Mm,
you just pair the habitat improvements with it.
that's wild. That's crazy to me.
That that's so key. I'm sure you see this a lot where guys find a spot that kind of it looks like a good spot for a food plot, right in the middle of the timber. Like maybe it's an old clearing or something like that, and maybe half the work's already done. So it looks like a food plot. I'll do a little clearing. I'll throw some seed down, and I have a food plot. Doesn't have good access. Maybe doesn't have a tree to put a stand in, or maybe your prevailing winds just never work there. So now you have this food plot that's like almost unhuntable, right?
Mm-hmm.
Where the way you do it is you pick the spot that has the access, has the prevailing wind, and then build around that. So you're basically building around the perfect tree rather than finding the spot and trying to figure all the other stuff after.
Yeah, and it really all it's hard to wrap it up into words, but it just really all works together so well. The more and more reps that I get in, I can, like I said, I can start to predict things on how I feel like things should work. And when I'm walking on one part of the property and I'm kind of identifying as a place like, I feel like this would be a really good place to focus the doe bedding, because there's that really great terrain feature right over there that's going to really condense this buck movement. And I remember that one great big maple tree that would have been just absolutely perfect for an evening stand location. So that's where, as I'm walking the property, I'm starting to draw that design in my mind. And it's just like the method behind the madness. It's just I've done it enough now that I'm able to do that, but it's taken me a while to be able to get to that point of being able to really actively draw it in my mind while I'm out there.
Can we kind of turn this? I know from like a private land to like more of a public land thing, just for a second, because I just want to kind of like dive into like because I think that we have like a diversity of public land and private land listeners that are gonna tune into this. So like when
Yeah.
you're going in, and my thing would be like, so if you were to go into a public land like you had said 5 years ago, 4 years, whatever, with all of your buddies and stuff, and you're looking at a certain piece of property like for and you have a couple of days to do it on public land out of state, like what are those features that you are really keying yourself into before you get the boots on the ground?
Yeah. So I'll start that off with we can talk about public land for as long as you want because that's my real jam. I love helping guys out on private, and I have a few nice pieces of private land to hunt, but I spend more time on public land than anywhere else. So we can talk about this the rest of the time if we want to. But as far as like if I'm going, because that's what we do a lot, we'll just pick a piece of public land, whatever state it is that we want to hunt in, and what we'll kind of do is like we'll all individually do our own e-scouting session, and we'll identify just whatever it is, what's like my point of interest, and then my couple other buddies, what's their points of interest, and we'll kind of bring them together and enter into like a Zoom call like this, and we'll just kind of break it down and be like, why did you pick this? And it's just, I believe in like that iron sharpen iron mentality where you're helping, especially if you're going into it with a team mindset, you're only going to have better hunts once you're there. But as far as like me, myself, I really look for the key terrain features. And then as a backup, I'm looking for what could be an overlooked area. And that always looks different. That's not going to be a specific terrain feature, and it's very hard to tell without putting boots on the ground. But pretty much every piece of public land I go to, there's a pretty consistent hunter access point from where the parking area is to get into it for at least a couple hundred yards, and it's very consistent, and the average hunter is just going to go in there and they're going to head out and they're going to get to the good stuff. Now there's opportunities somewhere along that, and maybe way in and maybe right next to the road, whatever it is, that people just aren't really going into. And I found it to be incredible how close these public land deer are willing to basically live right underneath the nose of where people are walking every day, but feel comfortable enough to just shack up there because people are walking right by them all the time.
And they just spend that time just sitting there watching these public land hunters literally walk right by them and not move a muscle.
Yeah, yep, no, it's a really cool thing to see it too. So, a little story on a public land piece this year that I hunt down here in Ohio. I've been after this really nice hill country buck all year. Haven't been able to catch up to him, but anyway, we found where his general bedding knob is on a particular wind. And what we were able to do was pair that with we had another trail camera that was strictly on it was an old logging road, but we had an idea like there's probably some human traffic on here. Well, it ended up being like there's a lot of human traffic on there. Like there's a lot of guys hunting this piece. And what this buck did was he was all behind them, but he was basically angled where he had a direct visual of that hunter in and out that access. And anytime you came in from that parking lot, like you would be hundreds and hundreds of yards away from him, and he's on to you. And the only way you have any kind of remote chance of getting this buck if he's in that bed and is by you have to come up and backdoor him. So it's just like little things like that where that's just like super high level stuff that a lot of people don't take into consideration. They're just coming into the woods, they're hunting the great features, but there's just so many layers of the onion you can peel back, which not all of it can be found from e-scouting, but you can get a really good head start by picking out these key points. And the more you see it, like once you can find that and then go back and look at that map and do e-scouting on the back end, you can understand why that buck was bedded there and find out, okay, if I'm looking at a new piece and I know, okay, this is where the hunter access is, how would a buck be bedded to do what this buck was doing on this other piece? Because it's really a copy paste formula. There's always going to be hunter pressure on public land, but there's still going to be mature bucks living on that piece of public land. So how do I get in the best position? And doing that is you do whatever anybody else isn't doing. That's what I found to be the best luck is run away from what the crowd's doing.
And that's one
I
of the,
know.
oh, go ahead.
I was just gonna. So this is kind of a loaded question because every piece is gonna be different depending on where you're going. Do you have a particular terrain feature that's just like your bread and butter, or your particular favorite thing that your eye just sees and you just find yourself flocking to and having the most success, or is it pretty much across the board?
It's really it varies from one piece to the next. I would have to say like if I'm hunting in Ohio though, I really like focusing on the tops of drainages where it's like a really steep drainage and then you get to the top and it's the first like flattest area. Those are usually pretty good places to shack up if you're going on like a on a rut hunt.
Mm,
Um, just because you can access right up the drainage, which isn't always the easiest thing to do. Like those are pretty steep and sometimes a couple 100 feet climb. But once you're up there, you're right on the edge of where you know all of the deer movement's going to be in front of you. So I really like targeting those during the rut. But outside of that rut time frame, there's just too many variables to say one way or another which one would be my favorite.
figured, but I'd
Yeah.
ask.
No.
Because it's more or less like putting the pieces of the puzzle together with those
Yeah.
with those
Yeah,
features. So like
exactly.
you have to figure out where they're gonna move on what feature and do what, where, and when.
Yep.
So a situation like that I call it a ditch funnel, but the top of the
Hmm.
drainage, something like that, you're accessing up the drainage. I'm guessing you're looking for a wind coming back down the drainage, parallel with the drainage, and then for like an afternoon sit. Now your thermals are dropping down the drainage behind you, and the wind's also blowing that way. Would be ideal situation.
Yeah, and honestly, like when a lot of the places that I hunt down in the southeast part of the state, the elevation is so steep, like or the terrain is so steep, and those drainages are just like so sharp that you can access right up them. And if you are hunting like right on the edge of where your access is, I see a lot of times that those thermals are going to overpower that wind direction, and like that flat bowl in front of you is kind of going to pull everything down and suck it back down that drainage. And that's where I can have a pretty consistent thermal pull down that drainage, even considerably earlier in the day. So sometimes I'm able to get into those drainages at 11:30 in the morning and sit on them for the rest of the day, but have that constant downward pull. I see it on the drainages and I see it on the shelves that if you're willing to make that climb directly up and sit right on that edge, then you can get that thermal pull down a lot sooner than you would think if you're just looking at the common knowledge of thermals are up in the morning and down in the evening. And that's just where getting the reps in and understanding. But that's a whole nother thing that I do is I'll go out there during my winter scouting, my spring scouting, and I'll take the milkweed with me then at different times of the day intentionally to know like mental note this place I can stand at the top of this drainage, drop my milkweed and it's sucking down and it's not even the afternoon yet. um,
Mm.
Granted some factors will change from the spring to the fall, but it gives me at least a ballpark to know that I can continue to stack these odds in my favor of when do I think I can comfortably get into said terrain feature.
Makes sense.
Yeah, and that's one of the problems too, though, is like the thermal aspect of it because you put all the terrain features into one, and then now you want to hunt those areas, and then the thermals. You have to add your wind and your thermals to it, like that. For example, like you just know it's common knowledge because you've done it so many times in repetition to be in those areas to know that that wind does that with that thermal, and that's the only way to know it. Like you're not gonna you can look at a map, but not. I mean, like you said, you know that thermal's up in the morning, down at night. Like that's common knowledge, but you could get there and it could change.
Yeah, exactly. And you could, and the thing is, like, sometimes if it's a 20 some mile an hour wind, then maybe the thermals don't do what they did that day when you're out there when it was only a 7 mile an hour wind.
Hmm.
And that's where I just try to almost like I'll find my quote unquote spot on public land that I want to target and draw up what's the dream scenario for this, and then only go in there when that dream scenario is happening with the weather. So if like I know I can go in there on a 7 to 10 mile an hour wind, I'm going to get that thermal pull, and I know there's a doe bedding up the ridge a little bit. Well, there's probably a pretty good chance that that buck's going to be cruising this area on that day, and I know he's not going to know I'm here. So that's when I'm going to hunt that spot. So really the same mindset as working on a piece of private land. It's just I can't manipulate the habitat on public land, but I can still find a way to stack as many odds in my favor to have these successful sits.
I think that's what makes it the most fun is because you can't manipulate it. You have to play to the
Yeah.
rules of the land. Like you
Yeah.
have to. I don't. I guess that's the attraction to public land hunting because like it makes it that much more challenging to try and put those
Hmm.
pieces together. But there's nothing you can do about it. You just have to wait for the right wind, the right time, and be in the right area. Like you can't. I can't
Yeah.
change it. Like if I had a piece of property, say I had 100 acres, I can manipulate it to put the bedding here, the food here,
Hmm.
and then I know that my access is here. But like public land, it just the way it lays is what it lays, and you're just waiting for that right wind, and it might not be a prevailing wind. You might have to wait for those 3 prime days where that wind shifts just for those days, and you're just waiting for a storm front for something to change, and then you can go in there and try and kill that deer and hope that it's there. Like
Yeah.
I don't.
Oh
I guess
yeah.
that's an attraction to it. I guess. Like I don't
Hmm.
know.
Yeah, and then the beauty of public land at the end of the day is you put all that planning and work into it on the front end, and then you get that day and you go out there and hunt, and then somebody who's never been on the public land walks in front of you, and they're just like out there doing their thing, and it's just like I never get upset about it because again
Mm,
it's public land, but it's just like that is the beauty of public land is that literally anything can happen, and it doesn't even have to be a deer hunter, like. I get people that are out there doing anything and everything.
mm-hmm.
And some people are just out there to enjoy the forest. And guess what? They have no idea that they're walking right through a rut funnel. They're just there. And just the way that it goes.
Or you're sitting there and you're waiting for that right thing, and you have a camera over a scrape, and you know that in this in a certain day around these deer show up in this certain scrape, right? And you're just waiting, you're waiting, and then a random jogger runs through the scrape, and you're like,
Yep.
uh, what are you
Yep.
doing? You were in the middle of nowhere. You've ended
Yep.
up across. You were in the primo area where I did not want to go because I'm on the outside of bedding, and I have a scrape there that a typical buck would show up in, and then some guys running through, or a guy with his dog, and his dog's rolling in your scrape, and you're like, oh my god,
Yep.
what is going on?
Everything's gone. Yep.
The
Yep. That's the
interesting thing
beauty.
about the interesting thing about that is if you're a jogger or a guy walking your dog, just aimlessly walking through the woods, they don't even realize it, but most of the time they're probably following natural features, right? Path of least resistance and whatnot. So that's going to bring them across the bench or through a saddle, which is the same reason the deer do it, right? So
Yep.
that
Exactly.
kind of what puts that random jogger who's a half a mile from the closest blazed trail in front of Treb's camera for the
Yep.
same reason it
Absolutely.
puts the deer in front of that camera.
Yeah. You nailed it.
And even when you're scouting too, like for guys that might not really even know what to do scouting, like even just to walk in the woods, you're naturally going to walk those same areas that deer do because you're an animal too, right? But you're looking at the futures as you're walking, and you're going down those least path of resistance, and those are those typical areas where deer would be too, because you're not going to walk through the bedding, right? Because that's the thickest,
Hmm.
nastiest thing. So like people don't realize it until you put it all together, because when it comes to e-scouting, like a lot of people, it's just a lot of lines. Nobody really, unless you know how to dissect it properly, you don't really know what you're looking at. But if you were to take
Yeah.
it and just walk in the woods naturally and then put one and one together, like what it looks like on a map and what it looks like in person. Like, because a lot of people have a tough time with e-scouting. E-scouting is not an
Hmm.
easy thing if you don't know it or see it or understand what it actually looks like in the woods.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think one of the biggest things that helped me is doing the prep work, e-scouting before I'm going into an area. But once I'm out there, really consuming myself of just like being in that moment. Because what you said about you're going to generally walk where the deer are going to be walking, that's what you're going to do. But you can't be constantly up and down looking at your phone, looking at the land, looking at your phone, looking at the land. Even if I don't exactly get to where I planned on going on my phone, there's a reason that my natural tendency is pulling me one direction. And it's because I have that gut instinct now because I've seen enough of this deer sign to know like I need to go that way. And even though my waypoint's the other direction, I'm going to go this way. And it's okay to get off course when you're out in the woods. You know, the beauty of these mapping apps is you can download them. They have GPS. You're not going to get lost. Like you're going to be able to find your way back to the car. So don't be afraid when you're out in the field to actually just go and explore whatever feels right, even if it's not where you think those deer should be.
No, and I think you brought up a really good point. Like, it's okay to explore over that next ridge where you might have thought was good on a map, but like to actually go over there because you could bump into something that you never even thought that would ever be there because like yeah, it's textbook, but not every deer is textbook. Like that buck that you're saying that was close to the parking lot. Like that deer, that's not a textbook thing. That's an overlooked area. So like you just walking aimlessly and coming up on a big rub line or a community scrape or some type of food source that you didn't know was there. It was a big oak flat or whatever the case may be. I mean it's okay to just kind of like aimlessly walk through the woods to try and find those right features because you might come across something that you never thought was there. Like I've had that
Yeah,
happen a ton.
absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And that was a light bulb moment. I'm lucky enough that I get to spend some time um, scouting down in Ohio with guys that have been doing it for decades upon decades, and they know these areas like the back of their hand, and they can go out there, no map needed, nothing. And that was like the pivotal thing I learned from them was, don't get so caught up when you're in the field of that e-scouting. Like the e-scouting is nothing more than a tool to make you become that better hunter,
Hmm.
where you still have to develop that woodsmanship when you're out in the woods hunting. I learned the most being on stand. Like I'm gonna hunt as much as I can because when you sit there, if you put yourself in a position where you're sitting there and you're watching deer after deer go in front of this one tree or they're all browsing on this one type of bush, whatever it may be. Like I'm always asking myself, why are they doing that? Like what is causing that to happen? Because there's always a reason. Like that's the one thing is that deer are going to do something for an intentional reason. There's usually not randomness to it. And if there's consistencies, go and find out what that consistency is and how can I now use it to my advantage to get the deer that I'm targeting. Um, but that's definitely the biggest thing. Just like being in the moment when you're out in the field.
That's that's kind of funny because like we always think about like postseason scouting, right? So like that's like the time right now that we're going out and we're postseason scouting to see where those deer are, right? And that we're trying to figure out where they were eating at that point or where they were rutting at that point or whatever the case may be, and it might change, right? Like it might vary that like this certain oak tree is not dropping next year. So like where do you find or how do you come up to those food sources to find the right food source where those deer are then gonna what I'm saying, like food to bedding. So now you
Mm-hmm.
want to be in the middle of it, but what if that food source changes, right? And how do you predict to that? Like
Yep. And it does it because that's the thing is it changes every year. Whether you're in a place that has a lot of ag, those ag fields are going to get rotated every year, and that's going to change the macro movements. Or if you're just in an area of heavy timber, whatever it is that those deer are eating, like you said, some years this oak tree isn't dropping, but some years this oak tree is. And like what I like to do, if I'm in say a timber setting and I want to hunt an early season buck from a bedding area. I'm going to go out now and I'm going to locate all of the white oak trees that I would be targeting in the early season as that prime food source for that buck. And I will know where all of those are, correlate it to any type of buck bedding that I can find. And then before season, once I can actually tell, okay, this oak tree is or is not producing, I can go and just specifically scout all of those oak trees and I can confirm or deny, okay, yes, A, C, and D are all dropping, but all of the others aren't. Now I can go and put my trail cameras out on just the oak trees that are dropping and is my target buck coming into one of those oak trees? And then I can formulate a game plan of I already picked the spot for this oak tree and I know where I need to be. And I'm going to come out here and just hunt it now. Where I might have 10 spots in one little ridge system, but only two of those spots are going to be good each season. And they're always going to be two different spots. But I just stack those spots, have them ready to go in the back pocket. And then I know I'm just firing good hunts off every time I'm out there.
And is that what you're looking for early season? Is more or less is those white oaks to be dropping? Is that's that like those late September, early October? Like that's really what you're focusing on is the white oaks dropping?
Yeah, myself personally, I love targeting a white oak tree. Where our season opens, it's always the last Saturday in September, and it's really like a good range where the opener through like the next week, the white oaks are just like really good for these bucks. And I have some really good hunts over them, but you have to be under the right one. And on a year like this year, pretty much all of the white oak trees were dropping, so it was very hard to narrow down. I would rather have a year where there's not a bumper crop because it's easier to target specific white oaks. And that's why I like to focus on the white oaks, those because those bucks really like to hit them in the early parts of the season.
So now I don't know if you can explain this or not, but what is the deal
Hmm.
between a white and a red oak, right? Where the is it like the tangents in a red oak that they won't eat them until later of the year, or what is that whole conception that we have of whites over reds?
From what I understand on it, and it's not something I know to be 100% true, but like I said, from my understanding, I know like those whites when they first drop are like sweet to them. And I think that it's just they don't last for a very long time. So they want them. It's like getting a piece of candy where it's like, oh, that was really good. I want to eat it. But like if someone said, here's your favorite candy. You only get to eat it for 4 days out of the entire year, and then you're not going to get it until next year. You're going to want to eat it as much as you can those 4 days because you know it's going to be a full year till you get it again. And granted, that's not like their exact thought process, but you can kind of paint the picture of
Mm-hmm.
why there's such a pull when they drop. And then as far as like the red oaks go, like I just don't think they have that same type of attraction as the whites do.
Mm-hmm. No, I was just wondering maybe you knew something about it. I mean, because like you do see they do eat them later on, but it's not like they don't sit underneath them and just gargle them in like they do white oaks. Like
Yeah.
if there's a white oaks in like especially here we have a lot of mountain laurel, and if you can find a
Mm.
dropping white oaks in the early October in those in the mountain laurel, they'll literally stand underneath them with their mouths open and just wait for them to drop in. Like they,
Yeah.
because then they're sheltered. You know what I'm saying? Like they're just
Oh yeah.
they live in them.
Yep.
But you don't see it with the red oaks. Like you come across a red oak dropping, and you're like, there hasn't been a deer here in 5 years.
Well,
Right.
You know, like it's
Yep.
just
I don't know how it is out where you are, Greg, but red oaks here, they're everywhere. You can't
Yeah.
even
Same
you
here.
can't even
Yeah.
isolate them. You know what I mean? They're everywhere. Can't go anywhere in the woods without pointing out a red oak tree. White oaks, I mean, I could pretty much drop a pin on every white oak tree I
mm-hmm,
find. They're pretty rare. So,
Yep.
they're whether if the white oaks aren't dropping, um, or they dried up, the deer could be anywhere if you have a
mm-hmm.
bumper acorn crop. You know what I mean? And
Yeah.
then at that point, now you're back to either low pressure areas or ideal bedding areas is where you're going to find the deer because they can pretty much eat anywhere.
Yep, exactly. That's exactly how it is down here as well.
Well, we've had all those problems with like the Ashboro and all this other stuff and them killing off the white oaks. There's really not a lot of that stuff that you're really, a lot of the deer, if there's not a lot of white oaks dropping, they're more or less just browsing on browse and, fresh
Hmm.
little thing. I mean, it's kind of crazy, honestly, because you're just looking for that food source, and sometimes you can't find it. Like it's a tough thing to come across where you know that they're naturally be going up this one thing, but you're like, well, what are they actually eating? Like you just,
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Just it takes time, and it's something that you get lucky to find it, but you create that luck by spending time out in the field, and that's what's so difficult about it is that these sources shift so much that it's like when you are in the spot, that spot's only going to be the spot for so long before you have to find the next spot. And that's why I try to log all of the data of what I find so that way I know for the following years how can I use that so I can shorten the curve once I'm back out in the field in the fall.
well, it's frustrating because like so say like this year you have the hunts of your life. You might have 10 hunts and they're like pristine and you've seen, a ton of deer and big bucks and whatever. But that's not naturally going to say like in your mind like you have to know when to hold them and when to fold them, right? Because like, do you go back to that one spot and hunt that really hard, or do you just have to now try and find another food source or another area to hunt? Like, are you gonna have the same luck in the same spot the next year? Nobody really know. I
Yeah.
mean, it's a tough it's a
Yeah. You
know
can
it or
play
hold it.
mind games.
Mm.
Yep,
And
no doubt.
when the people talk about it too, like, like all these things that we talked about throughout the whole entire podcast, like it's not a set in stone thing. Like, betting here or betting there or whatever, like it's a tough thing to figure out unless you do it a ton of times, right? I mean, like it's not,
Hmm.
we all talk about it like, oh, that's where a buck should bet, or that's doe betting, or that could potentially be a food source. But unless you actually see it physically, we're more or less guessing a lot of the times where some of that stuff is.
Yeah. I mean, you look at it like at the end of the day, we're into this hunting, but if you're successful one day out of the season, like it's a successful season. But if you hunt 20 times that year, say just easy numbers, you're 1 out of 20 is your ratio. And you're not, that's not a very good percentage of success, but you look at it amongst yourself and your peers that this was the best season of my life because I tagged this great big buck, but you were still only successful once. So that's what it is. It's just a lot of guessing, but what I've learned is that you want to try to make educated guesses.
Hmm.
And you're already playing a losing game, but how can I lose at it less often? Basically.
Yeah, no, it's so true. What do you got, Steve? I see the smoke coming out of your ears, bro.
I have a question. I'm trying to think of how to word it properly. So, in relation to buck bedding and food or hot food source, right? And let's take like one hot white oak out of the equation, right? So you have your red oaks dropping and whatnot. How often do you see a will a buck change his bedding more based on sporadic food, or do you think he's more likely to go for the better bedding? Like, say he's got a bomb-proof bedding location, is he more likely to reuse that bedding location because it's such a good bedding, and then go to the food, or is he more likely to move his bed to the food?
I think that's going to change based off of how old that buck is. I think the younger the buck, the more they're not going to like worry so much about the bedding. But the older the buck, they're going to spend more time in the better beds, even if that means them make it a longer trek to get to that food.
Okay.
And I think that's like the best way to summarize it because what I notice is like the older the buck gets, generally that buck is going to be more reclusive because the bucks that aren't reclusive from a personality standpoint are the ones that run in front of the wrong tree at the first week of November when they're 2 years old and get shot by somebody that's on rutcation. Now, the buck that didn't do that and he stayed around his home, he didn't get shot when he was two. So he's going to do the same thing because, like, in their mind, they just want to survive and live and pass along their genetics. And what kept that buck alive was not running around. So I see like those are typically the personalities of the bucks that make it to older. But again, every buck has its own personality, and you could just get that super old buck that is just a fiery old thing, and he just goes and runs around like crazy. So it's definitely individualized based on the buck, but generally, I feel like the older a buck is, the more they're going to lean in on that better bedding area rather than that better food source because I think
Right.
they'll just be willing to survive.
That's kind of what I was thinking. So I'm glad you confirmed it.
Yeah.
And I think honestly, a lot of those the bigger bucks, honestly, they know that it's safer, right? Like they're not gonna. Why would they do that? You know, and they've learned. They were at 2.5 years old and got grunted at and realized it. So now they're a little bit back. They're a little bit more back tension on it because
Hmm.
they're like, hold on, that's not good. You know
Yeah,
what I'm saying? And they just kind of.
definitely.
Or the other thing is that we just haven't figured out how to kill those deer in that area. Like we're missing that piece
Yeah.
of that puzzle because
Right.
they were able to stump it, right?
Yep.
I,
Absolutely. Yeah. And it's just always trying to stay one step ahead of them.
Yeah.
yeah. I think the argument that could be made, right, is if he's stubborn with his bedding on a weird food source year, now he has to travel more between bedding and food, which could potentially lead to getting killed if he's not smart enough to get back to bedding before, the sun comes up or whatever. But also, like we said, the bedding's so good, bomb proof. He's got the thermals in his face, the wind at his back. He can see the access. He's got that going for him. So I hate him.
Yeah. Yeah. And unfortunately, there's no absolutes in it either.
Right.
We can plan, and think we have it all figured out. And then they just go and do what deer do. And then you're like, wait a minute, you're not supposed to be doing that right now.
Yeah. So that kind of brings up a thought for me. One particular terrain feature that I kind of struggle with, I'd like for you to maybe try to share your knowledge is, and there's a lot of talk about it these days, is these points. Usually it's like it's a leeward edge of a point, and bucks prefer to bed on these points, right? Can you talk about that a little bit and what you're looking for and like where you're finding these beds on these points?
Yeah, so like for an example like of a buck bed that's out on that leeward point, what I see a lot of the times is you get like this convergence of the prevailing wind coming over the hilltop and then an upward thermal pull in the morning, and it kind of clashes right at that point. So the buck gets both of those scent cones, but then they also have this great visual overlooking the bottom. So the reason why I find so many of these beds on the points is because they have that great visual, but they always get that prevailing wind coming over the top while they're laying there. And that's how it makes the most sense to me. But that's going to be a wind based bed. Like that buck should only be there when, like, as he's on that leeward side, when the wind is coming out of that direction. So, like, if it's a south facing slope, he's going to be bedded there when it's a north when the wind's coming out of the north because it's going to be dumping over top of his back while he's overlooking that point.
Right. So I'm sure there's too many variables, but I'm trying to understand it. Are you finding, is there a certain elevation line? So you're looking at your topo map and you got all your lines showing the elevation, the top line being the top of the point, and then you've got
Mm-hmm.
elevation. Are you finding them at a certain part of the elevation? Like they're not right on top and they're not halfway
Yeah,
down. Is it like the second line down, give or take, or is there any constants that you're seeing there, like
I
repetitively?
th- I think that's a good place to start is like like the second, third contour line down from that top of that point and looking in that general area. And I'm more so trying to identify from afar something that's going to break them up so they're not just laying in the wide open. Like whether that be a big boulder or a blow down tree or a thick briar patch, like it can be any of those things just like what would this buck want to bed by. So I'm looking around that like just under the top of the point, and then what is the vegetation or like rocky feature, whatever it may be, that's going to want to make that buck be there. And then I'm going to go look at that spot, and then you can kind of start to pick up on, okay, like I'm finding more beds here, and then it just kind of starts clicking a little bit
Right.
faster when you're out in the field.
So that kind of goes back to what we were saying before. Like when you're dropping your pin, you're doing your e-scouting, you're dropping your pins. Your pins are just getting you close. Once you get there, that's when you have to
Yeah.
put the phone away, use your
Yep.
eyes, use common sense, look around, and your pin might be 100 yards off, but you're
Yep.
you're close.
Yeah, and I'll drop that pin, and what the area of that pin, I may be spending half hour, 45 minutes in that one area until I'm either finding what I need or I didn't find it, and I can kind of write that spot off. Like the spot just wasn't what I thought it was going to be. But sometimes it's right on. I'll drop a pin and I'll go there, and it's like, oh wow, that's pretty cool. This is
Community scrape
literally,
right there. Yeah.
yeah, this is literally right where I thought. And it's just like tap yourself on the back. You're like, hey,
Yeah.
I'm actually pretty good at this. And then there's other times that you drop the pin and you get there and you put boots on the ground. And you're like, what in the hell was I thinking? This is stupid.
On the next pin.
Yep, yep.
Well, sometimes when in e-scouting, it's better to know. It's better to knock places off than to try and figure out where good.
True.
So when you're scouting, go there and find that they're bad spots, then to
Yeah,
find out that they're good. You know what I'm saying? So like you're knocking off
for
bad
sure.
spots so that you're not consistently trying to hang out in spots that aren't any good.
Yeah, absolutely. Yep. It's just as good to find a spot that doesn't work as finding a spot that does work.
Right. I just couldn't speak English at the time. I'm very sorry about that.
That's all
Shiverish.
right.
Well, Greg, we really appreciate you jumping on with us, man. It's been super
Absolutely.
cool. Hopefully that guys can take a lot out of this on, their e-scouting aspect, and I hope that people don't bombard you with stupid questions.
Like we did.
No, that's all right. Not a problem. I answer any questions that I can. I really just enjoy helping people out any way that I can. Like I definitely don't have everything figured out, but I spend enough time out there to be able to at least help point people in the right direction. And always happy to help any way I can.
Absolutely. Well, man, I got one last question before we let you go, and that is, Greg, what drives you outdoors?
These days, honestly, it's just really building up the hunting community, man. Like ever since I started making the content, that's gotten me a bigger following, and getting to see the people have success from the stuff I put out there. It's just something that I love almost more than having my own success. And I think that us as hunters, us working together and doing things for the greater good, not out of a selfish mindset, is only better for us as a whole. And honestly, just keep on teaching people. Like I just want to keep on helping people any way that I can.
Man, there's not many of people like out there like you, man. There's not many anymore. It feels like everybody's out there to attack one another, and I think that, good guys like us need to band together and help one another, because there's so many negativity things out there on social media and stuff where hunters are
Yeah.
not helping one another. They just bound for their own success.
Yep,
And
absolutely, man. I couldn't agree more.
but good guys stick together. So, Greg, can
That's
you
right.
just tell everybody where they can find you, they can check you out, and you want to tell us a little bit about your ebook before we break off, because I think that that's a pretty cool thing that guys should go and check out.
Yeah, so for that ebook, I wrote an ebook here recently that goes into detail just about like how to read a topo map, just some of the key features that come with a topo map, how to use the Onyx app, and really a tutorial on like step by step of how to really get the most out of the app for e-scouting, and then just kind of a little bit of a look in on my year-long scouting process and how I'm using Onyx specifically to become a better hunter. So I put a ton of information in there to try to be as helpful as possible. That can be found on our company website. It's whitetailpartners.com/onyx dash masterclass. And I'll also have you guys drop that link down below too, so that
Mm-hmm.
way people can find it. But yeah, it's a great book. All you gotta do is you go to that link, type in your email, and then you're able to download it. And there's a ton of really good info in there to keep you busy all winter. And then outside of that, definitely most active on my Instagram, and that's going to be Ohio_whitetail_partners. And if you have a specific question about wanting help either on your property or just understanding something a little bit further, you can send me an email and that's just ohio@whitetailpartners.com.
Awesome, Greg. Man, we really appreciate you jumping on, man, and really diving into some things. I don't think that'll be the last time that we hear your voice here on the Outdoor Drive, man. Really
Yeah,
thank you a
anytime.
lot. And for everybody else, thanks for taking the ride right here on the Outdoor Drive.